You're listening to the PAZNIA Radio Network.
All right, and welcome to Music Monday, actually Metal Monday, here on the PAZNIA Radio Network, the entertainment and education arm of the PAZNIA Free Press, a service of the Free Republic of PAZNIA. To learn more or to join this burgeoning parallel network, just visit PAZNIA, PAZNIA.com. Tonight I've got, 10 or so hard-hitting tracks for you, maybe closer to a dozen, but bands include Defiance, Born of Osiris, Northlane, and Thy Art Is Murder, to name a few. Most have a sort of fuck the technocracy vibe, others are, well, just different. You'll have to tune in and find out. PAZNIA.com/radio is the link for all things PAZNIA Radio Network related. There you can find the full transmission schedule, where and how to stream, ways to donate, our future vision for the network, and ways to reach out. On that note, if you happen to have a show or podcast and want to join the PAZNIA Radio Network, please do reach out. We're currently looking to fill out our Saturday time slots. 5:30, 6, and 7 p.m. Central Times. And I think maybe at 8 p.m. Central Time might even be possible. Pre-recorded and or live shows are great. Just email me, coordinator@PAZNIA.com, and let's talk about making it happen. Yeah, let's get to some fucking metal, shall we? Yes, let's do it. We're going to kick it off tonight with a now-defunct band called Defiance. They recently started a new band called Night Rider, but Defiance is still definitely one of my favorites. I think it was 2012. And my brother, me, and some friends went to Warped Tour Chicago. Waiting in line, a few of their band members were handing out free CDs in the parking lot. Now, I didn't fall in love with them for a handful of years, but it's still one of my favorites to drum up to this day. This first one is We the Machines by Defiance, followed by Machine by Born of Osiris. Then the next three are all Northlane. I'll be back a time or two throughout, but I want to keep the metal flowing. So yeah, grab your glass of bourbon, roll up a dab lace joint, non-KYC cigarettes, or whatever else suits your fancy. You're listening to Metal Mondays here on the PAZNIA Radio Network.
Why can't you see the joy of
You're listening to the PAZNIA Radio Network.
All right, and welcome to Music Monday, actually Metal Monday, here on the PAZNIA Radio Network, the entertainment and education arm of the PAZNIA Free Press, a service of the Free Republic of PAZNIA. To learn more or to join this burgeoning parallel network, just visit PAZNIA, PAZNIA.com. Tonight I've got, 10 or so hard-hitting tracks for you, maybe closer to a dozen, but bands include Defiance, Born of Osiris, Northlane, and Thy Art Is Murder, to name a few. Most have a sort of fuck the technocracy vibe, others are, well, just different. You'll have to tune in and find out. PAZNIA.com/radio is the link for all things PAZNIA Radio Network related. There you can find the full transmission schedule, where and how to stream, ways to donate, our future vision for the network, and ways to reach out. On that note, if you happen to have a show or podcast and want to join the PAZNIA Radio Network, please do reach out. We're currently looking to fill out our Saturday time slots, 5:30, 6, and 7 p.m. Central Times. And I think maybe at 8 p.m. Central Time might even be possible. Pre-recorded and or live shows are great. Just email me, coordinator@PAZNIA.com, and let's talk about making it happen. Yeah, let's get to some fucking metal, shall we? Yes, let's do it. We're going to kick it off tonight with a now-defunct band called Defiance. They recently started a new band called Night Rider, but Defiance is still definitely one of my favorites. I think it was 2012, and my brother, me, and some friends went to Warped Tour Chicago. Waiting in line, a few of their band members were handing out free CDs in the parking lot. Now, I didn't fall in love with them for a handful of years, but it's still one of my favorites to drum up to this day. This first one is We the Machines by Defiance, followed by Machine by Born of Osiris. Then the next three are all Northlane. I'll be back a time or two throughout, but I want to keep the metal flowing. So yeah, grab your glass of bourbon, roll up a dab lace joint, non-KYC cigarette, or whatever else suits your fancy. You're listening to Metal Mondays here on the PAZNIA Radio Network.
the colors dance when I close my eyes. Witnessing mysterious design, I can feel my body run. Can't you see the joy of life is right before your eyes? And implicit fit and love. Take a chance, close your eyes, and just dream. It sets me free. Why can't you see the joy of life is right before
Vonu means relative physical invulnerability to coercion. Vonu is a contraction of voluntary and not vulnerable. Vonu is somewhat like freedom or security, but those words mean many different things to different people. Rather than argue about what those words ought to mean, I speak of Vonu. Coercion includes murder, mayhem, slavery, robbery, rape, extortion, pollution, any physical interference with peaceful activities of another, whether by individuals or organizations. Coercion, especially institutionalized forms such as war, regimentations, and taxes, is one of the major problems of mankind. Practically all past attempts at solution have been top-down efforts to change society as a whole. Since the days of Babylon, there have been countless attempts to reform governments, take over governments, destroy governments, and manipulate public opinion. At most, such efforts bring temporary relief. Usually they have little effect. Often, they make matters worse. Vonu life represents a different approach to the problem. Vonu life does not waste space scolding government officials or proclaiming how society ought to be. Vonu Life speaks to you as an individual or small group and suggests ways you can avoid exploiting and being exploited. As you reduce the vulnerability, not only do you help yourself, indirectly you also help others by decreasing support of criminal institutions. Vonu is not necessarily only a few. Vonu will expand as there are more people willing to do. A Vonuan is a person who has achieved relative invulnerability to coercion. There are many kinds. Some live in the wilderness, where outsiders rarely go. Others live under the earth. Others move from place to place, living in vans, campers, buses, boats, or tents. Some have been Vonu for ages, people such as gypsies, mountain men, hobos, Seminoles. Others are recent refugees from the dying cities. This issue describes some of the equipment and techniques used. In future issues, I hope you will add your knowledge to what is in here. Vonu Life. How to live and let live, out of sight and minds of those unwilling to let live, by people who are doing it. To order your paperback copy today, just visit libertyunderattack.com/Vonu Life. Again, libertyunderattack.com/Vonu Life. Or to download this publication for free, visit vonupodcast.com/VL.
Vonu Life 2025, Resurrected. Introduction. Back in March 1973, Rayo and many of the most hardcore self-liberators of the time, and likely even today, published a massive 75,000-word issue of Vonu Life, that is shockingly relevant and of immense value, even today. And while that was a highlight, there was also an entire zine series of Vonu Life, which I recently digitized. As Rayo finished up those last words of transcribing, it was with a heavy heart. Until the idea hit him like a collapsing roof of a badly engineered underground shelter. Vonu Life should most certainly be resurrected, just as the overall freedom strategy of Vonu has in the modern day and age. And if you know anything about Vonu Life, you know some of the greatest content came from contributors. That's where you come in. Let's dive into the plan. The plan. Vonu Life, March 1973, was the only issue released in that year. Similarly, we should aim for one book a year, the first being Vonu Life 2025. That will give ample time to acquire and create content, and to have plenty to report on as far as developments, or setbacks, of our liberated lifestyles. Content Section 1, Situations and Searches, Lifestyle Reports from Self-Liberators, a report about your liberated lifestyle, things you've learned, your goals, what led you to Vonuism/self-liberation, etc. Reviews of books, equipment, organizations, tips and tricks, etc. Information that you feel is valuable to pass on, that's not in article form. Section 2, General Strategy. Back in Vonu Life's heyday, topics sought out included, van nomadism, pedestrian nomadism, wilderness Vonu, international travel, family and children, intentional communities, new country projects, financial independence, health liberation, Vonu in cities, and underground shelters and troglodytism. We still want articles on any and all of those topics, but additional ones include, private communications, sovereign networking, Vonuing in cities in the 2020s, alternative housing solutions, etc. If you're curious about your topic in particular, just ask. Examples of both will be posted at vonupodcast.com/VAir2025. Timeframes. Any submissions must be made by July 1st, 2025. After a few months of editing and preparing, we will aim for a fall 2025 release. Notes: this is not a general, send us an article submission to fill space. It has to be of the caliber that Vonu Life deserves and was founded upon. Hardcore solutions/hardcore action, no political crusading and no collective movementism. The principle of voluntarism, that all interactions should be voluntary, must be maintained. I.e., don't siphon, steal, gas to fund your van nomadism. General proofreading/editing will be done on every article, maintaining each author's individual voice, but as always, editorial designs have to be made. Email submissions, questions, ideas to shane@libertyunderattack.com.
All right, we're about halfway through, and it's only going to get heavier. Who wants some Bill Cooper metal? I know I want some Bill Cooper metal. But first, some There It Is Murder, one of their lesser-known but powerful tracks, called They Will Know Another. Then yes, we'll get into some Bill Cooper metal, including my old friend Jay Cooper, the one behind They Dwell Beneath the Temples. I guess it's just a little tidbit here. The second episode of Liberty Attack Radio I did, Live Radio, back on the Freedom Phalanx Radio Network. I guess this would have been like mid-February 2015. But yeah, he was a guest on there. But pertaining to They Dwell Beneath the Temples, he does it all. Guitar, drums, bass, vocals, production, etc. Wherever you are, Jay, cheers, brother. It's been a long time. Now, as for the rest of y'all, let's get back to some metal. There It Is Murder, They Will Know Another. Enjoy.
What you are hearing, folks, is for the first time in history the public revelation of the origin, the history, the dogma, and the identity of those who operate in secret to bring about a worldwide totalitarian socialist government. They are known to Christians as Mystery Babylon. It is an ancient religion. Those of you who are smart enough to know what is transpiring here know that these are historic broadcasts, and by making these broadcasts, I have sealed my fate. The sun enters each heavenly sign or house of the zodiac in what is called the 30th degree, and leaves at the 33rd degree. Thus, God's Son is said by the ancients to begin his ministry at 30 and dies at 33. A Freemason is not told the truth of the object of his worship until he attains the 30th degree. And this is why the highest degree in Freemasonry is the 33rd degree, for no one can rise higher than the sun. When viewing the shimmering rays of sunlight on a body of water at dawn or sunset, one can still see today how God's Son walks on water. It was well understood by ancient man that our weather was caused and controlled by the sun. It was a simple fact that God's Son had the power to control storms at will. The ancient Egyptians taught that he did this as he rested in his heavenly boat while crossing the sky. Thus we read that God's Son quieted the tempest, or great storm on the sea, while in his boat. Which boat? The boat of Isis. Ra, the sun god, also known as Osiris, in the bark of millions of years in which he traversed the heavens, he wears on his head and accompanies a vast sun disk, symbolizing his powers as Lord of the heavens. The boat formed of a serpent bears his eye, and the god is seated on a pedestal representing Mayat, the divine order. Folks, when we stop to realize that every single king, prince, lord, governor, dictator, despotic ruler, civil and social institution, national flag, coat of arms, educational institution, military medal, award, organizational insignia, medallion, badge, emblem, citation, trophy, banner, pendant, political standard, or ensign, agency of government, or religion uses the sun as a primary symbol, then it can truly be said in the mystery school that God's Son is, quote, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, unquote. A worldwide totalitarian socialist government. They are known to Christians as Mystery Babylon. It is an ancient religion. Those of you who are smart enough to know what is transpiring here know that these are historic broadcasts, and by making these broadcasts, I have sealed my fate.
A worldwide totalitarian socialist government.
The origin of symbolism. Carlyle said, "It is through symbols that man can consciously or unconsciously live, move, and has his being." Those ages, moreover, are accounted the noblest, which can best recognize symbolic worth and prize it at its highest. You just listened to an opening number called The Circle of Life. to the lyrics, and if you have studied the other symbolism being presented to the American public, especially within the last few years, and escalating exponentially as time goes by, you will recognize much of what you have been seeing and hearing and watching and what has been being inculcated into your subconscious in this text. With the 48 constellations, that's right, constellations. I'm not talking some weird astrology stuff. This is out of the mouths of the occult masters of those who are making a bid for the world. They are at the point in time that they have been striving for throughout history, where finally, if no one foils their efforts, the pearl of great price is within their reach. All of their machinations have been brought to fruition.
Now that the technological foundation is laid for the PAZNIA Radio Network, we are now ready to start building out a regular, and more frequent transmission schedule of self-liberational media. Do you want to host your own show on the PAZNIA Radio Network? Do you already have a show or podcast that you would like premiered or replayed during our transmissions? Something else? Reach out to Coordinator Rayo to discuss details. Email coordinator@PAZNIA.com. Again, coordinator@PAZNIA.com. See you in the second realm.
While infrastructure costs for the PAZNIA Radio Network aren't exorbitant now, there are some costs. It will also increasingly demand more time as we move towards longer transmissions and more transmissions. If you'd like to help cover current costs and even the expansion of our efforts, please visit PAZNIA.com/shop. There, you can make a one-time fiat, Bitcoin, or Monero donation. You can become a stakeholder, and you can even order some one-of-a-kind PAZNIA merch, ranging from shirts to hats to flags, all the way to beach towels. Again, that link at PAZNIA.com/shop. Cheers from the Free Republic.
You're listening to the PAZNIA Radio Network.
You can't run and hide forever. The state is a reckless, unhinged firestorm of death and bondage that can only run amok, killing and eating everything it can without care for the well-being of anything, not even itself. And even when it kills itself, you still won't catch a break, because it will come back. That's because the state is not any one government. It isn't even all of them. It's something else. It's a zombie mind virus, and it has been virulent enough to go on for 10,000 years. You know that the state cannot be talked down. You know that there is nothing you can offer it to get it to leave you alone. Because it wants everything. It won't stop until you're dead and then some. So you run, and you hide, and you quietly eke out your little bit of the agora somewhere in the darkness. But are you truly happy to live like a rat, scurrying around, scrounging for scraps and hiding in holes, while your loved ones die without good health care, countless children die of hunger, the world hurtles toward nuclear war, and science and technology are held back by 100 years? You can't run and hide forever. You cannot easily hide or shuffle around something like a hospital, a car factory, or even a small farm. The agora will never wholly overtake the state. You and your offspring will never taste the greatness that is mankind's birthright through running and hiding alone. You must fight. But if you don't want to fight, I bet you'd shell out some good bread to have somebody else fight for you, boss. That's where insurrectionary agorism comes in. It's the same agorism you know and love, but tweaked a little bit to make it better, faster, sleeker, and sexier. And, you know, more likely to end the state sometime this century. Read on to get the lowdown on this sexy new craze sweeping the star system. That was a sneak peek of Insurrectionary Agorism, a newer manifesto. You can read the whole thing, and a whole lot of other cool shit too, in Vonu Life 2025, which should hopefully be out later this year, maybe around fall. My name is Thane Riddle. I'm the one who wrote Insurrectionary Agorism, or rather I'm the one who is scrambling to write it before the deadline, which is July 1st, by the way, for those of you who've forgotten to start writing their Vonu Life submissions. However, while it's true I'm writing a manifesto, I am no mere philosopher. Much like the Unabomber, I'm the kind of nigga that likes to get shit done alongside his manifesto. Most folks who know me think of me as a privacy consultant, or even an all-around security expert, and that's true. I've been an operational security consultant for many years, and I'm also writing something about that for Vonu Life, which will be called Hiding Stuff. However, what I mostly want to tell you about today is the new weekly live show I'm going to have on the PAZNIA Radio Network. It's going to be called Cloak and Dagger, and it'll be all about giving you grounded tips for privacy and security that will help you in your everyday life. And much like Insurrectionary Agorism, we'll also talk about what can be done today to build up the so-called second realm, and yes, maybe even take down the state once and for all. Lord knows I could autistically talk your ear off for 2 hours or more, like the great Kyle Reardon. But that's not what this show's gonna be like. It will be fast, sleek, and sexy. It'll be broken up into sundry bits. We're gonna have a short news bit, but we won't talk about all that gay shit other folks do, only quickly touch on things that could hit your privacy or security in some way. You know, something you might wanna do something about. We're also gonna have interviews, super chats, and even live call-ins. I'll also fuck around as much as I can get away with, maybe throw in a few skits, prank calls, and I might even troll somebody. Maybe even you, dear listener. Come along with us as we fumble around and fuck everything up trying to work out how to run our new live show. Tune in to the PAZNIA Radio Network on Saturdays starting May 31st at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. You can find the PAZNIA Radio Network on Library and elsewhere. Check the show notes for links.
drop of blood for every innocent man that has suffered at your hands. You'll never fucking bleed us out. How many more will you
All right, and we are at the end of this transmission. One more song to close us out. This is The Final Hour by Molotov Solution. PAZNIA.com/radio, PAZNIA.com/radio. Please consider sharing around, donating, or starting a show here on the PAZNIA Radio Network. Thanks for being here. Cheers.